You're listening to the Immortal Icons of Dance podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Johnson. This past summer, Immortal Icons of Dance celebrated the 50th anniversary of Michael Bennett's chorus line. I interviewed several original cast members, as well as several iconic Cassies of all generations. My research was even featured in the official chorus line 50th anniversary concert at the Schubert Theater, where a few photos that I sourced were used in the In Memoriam video honoring original cast members who are no longer with us. It was an honor to be able to contribute to that special and historic evening, and a thrill to see something I had contributed on the Schubert Theater stage. I was invited backstage before the dress rehearsal on the day of the concert to meet the costume team and view the costumes. I even got to touch Robert Lapone's original Zack sweater. It was incredible watching the dress rehearsal and seeing the raw emotion on stage in every number. If you'd like to get a behind-the-scenes look at this dress rehearsal, I recorded all of my observations that afternoon and published them as a blog post in the vault. You can find these posts by visiting immortaliconsofdance.com/vault and selecting the chorus line category. Speaking of publishing, I wrote my debut article for Playbill, which was featured on their website, and detailed the experiences of 5 iconic Cassies: Donna McKechnie, Charlotte D'Amboise, Robin Herder, Jessica Lee Golden, and Sarah Bowden. It was a very exciting summer for all of us chorus line lovers. But now it's time to learn about another show that opened in 1975 and celebrates its 50th anniversary this year, and that show is Bob Fosse's Chicago. Chicago and a chorus line opened in the same season, but that was not originally supposed to be the case. Chicago was postponed by several months when, in the first week of rehearsals, Fosse needed to undergo bypass surgery on his heart. By the time he recuperated and rehearsals resumed, the timeline for the show had been pushed into the next Broadway season, which meant both shows would be competing at the Tony Awards against each other. Although both shows were nominated for 13 awards, Chorus Line walked away with 10, and Chicago was 0. Despite this, Chicago still had a respectable run, lasting 2 years and 2 months, or 936 performances on Broadway. Featuring some of the greatest talents of the generation, the show was directed and choreographed by Bob Fosse, starred Gwen, Verdon, Chita, Rivera, and Jerry Orbach, and had music and lyrics by John Kander and Fred Ebb. The set design was by Tony Walton and costumes by Patricia Ziprot. Each of these people were giants in their profession. I've done a feature on each of these artists' contributions to Chicago, which again, you can read at immortaliconsofdance.com/vault. This time selecting the Chicago category. One of the most fascinating parts about researching the show has been learning that Chicago is not just 50 years old, it's really 100. Okay, stick with me here. The characters Roxy and Velma are based on 2 real-life women in 1924 named Beulah and Belva, both of whom murdered their lovers and were in the custody of the Cook County Jail in Illinois. There really was a jail matron like Mama Morton, there really was a gullible husband like Amos, and there were really other murderesses in the cell block. There was even a slick lawyer like Billy Flynn who got his clients acquitted. And how do we know this? Because of a woman named Maureen Dallas Watkins, who was a reporter for the Chicago Tribune at the time. She covered the trials of these women in a time before television or social media, when newspapers were the primary form of information but also entertainment. The newspaper with the most sensational headlines sold more papers. Maureen recorded the trials in impeccable detail, even recording the women's glamorous outfits and demeanor on the stand. When you read the articles and headlines, if you're familiar with the script of Chicago, you would be shocked to see how many lines and lyrics and scenarios were taken directly from these news reportings. And that's because, after just 8 months of working as a reporter, Maureen quit, citing that all the murders she was covering were starting to get to her. She started praying for, quote, good murders to come along for her to write about, and that's when she knew it was time to get out. But she used her experiences to write her first play. Her play was titled Chicago. It opened on Broadway in 1926 at the Music Box Theater and ran for 172 performances with our beloved characters Roxy, Velma, and all the rest. Just sans music. The play was adapted into a silent film by Cecil B. DeMille in 1927, and again adapted into a 20th Century Fox film in 1942, this time titled Roxy Hart, starring Ginger Rogers. It was Gwen Verdon who watched the Ginger Rogers film and then read the original play and knew that this was a project that she and Fosse should bring to life in the form of a musical. They approached Maureen Watkins in order to buy the rights to adapt the play into a musical, but Maureen refused. I've read and heard different versions of this story, but Marcia Bagwell says that she heard this directly from Bob and Gwen, that Maureen promised them the rights under the condition that it couldn't be performed until after Maureen's death. When she did pass in 1969, the rights were transferred to Maureen's mother. When her mother passed, the rights were transferred to her agent. It was only then that Gwen was given first right of refusal on the material. So they bought the right and began developing the musical in 1974 when progress stalled due to Fosse's heart problems. I know that was a lot of backstory, but what can you expect when a project is 100 years old? I highly recommend you head over to the vault later to see the photos, interviews, footage on all the subjects that I've just talked about. I'll include a link to the vault in the show notes of this episode. Today's interview makes for a nice transition between the Chorus Line series and the Chicago series because my guest, Pamela Sousa, performed in both shows. She was an original member of the ensemble of Chicago, but because a Chorus Line ran for 15 years, she later went on to be a replacement for Cassie in the Broadway company. Pamela made her Broadway debut in 1972 in Sugar, which was choreographed and directed by Gower Champion. Later that year, she was a player in the original Bob Fosse production of Pippin. Following that, she originated the role of Mona in Chicago in 1975, was a replacement for Cassie in Chorus Line, appeared in the revival of Can-Can in 1981, in the production of The Loves of Anatole in 1985, and in Stepping Out in 1987. Additionally, Pamela worked for 8 years as stage director and choreographer for the Lyrics and Lyricists series at the 92nd Y in New York City. Her work has been presented on Broadway with her choreography for the Tony-nominated musical A Grand Night for Singing, the Tony-nominated musical Romance, Romance, and the off-Broadway hit Olympus on My Mind, for which she received rave notices. Pamela also worked with director Sidney Pollack on the film Sabrina. I hope you enjoy our conversation. This episode of Immortal Icons of Dance, we're here with Pamela Sousa talking about her experiences in the two 1975 hit Broadway productions, Chicago and A Chorus Line. Thank you for being here with me, Pamela.
No, thank you for asking me.
So let's start at the beginning. Could you first tell me where you grew up and how did you begin dancing?
Well, I grew up in a small town outside of San Francisco, California, and I started dancing at the age of 4 because my grandmother wanted to give my sister and I dance lessons for a year. Of course, I fell in love with it, so my parents continued me in dance class where my sister went on to do other things and became a veterinarian. But anyway, that's how I started way back when I was a little one.
Mm-hmm. Now, who were your early influences in dance, whether it was teachers that you had in person or maybe people that you saw on stage or screen?
You know, it's interesting growing up in the 60s there was a lot of dance on television. You had the Tom Hansen dancers, you had Jackie Gleason had his dancers, and I think as a young girl, that's what I saw, and I thought, oh my gosh, I would love to do that. I think that was an inspiration. I had wonderful teachers in San Francisco, Stan Condon and Pat Mason, and they were a wonderful dance studio who taught us a lot of things. We had strict Shiketti ballet, we had tap, we had jazz, so we learned a whole bunch of styles at a young age, and that's what I think I fell in love with.
Hmm. I wish they still had those variety shows because that's where I could see myself fit in, like the Judy Garland show and
Yeah,
Hullabaloo and all those kinds of things. I
yeah.
wish that was still that format was still around. So now, how can you talk about sort of your adolescent dance? When did you become very serious about it, and how did you end up in New York?
Well, I we the school dance school I was with became involved with a youth group called Youth of America. So it was a big hundred students, or from high school through middle school, I guess. There were singers, orchestra, and dancers, and we were the dancers. And so we went to the World's Fair in '67 in Toronto to perform. So we did a lot of performing. And when I was 17, the Civic Light Opera out of LA, which is something they have there. They do like a series of musicals that people can go to. They were doing My Fair Lady, and they were having auditions in San Francisco because they played in LA and San Francisco. So our teacher encouraged a bunch of us to go to the audition. Well, I went and I was chosen. So I was ready to give up high school and go off. And my parents said, no, you can't. So I had to tell them that I wasn't able to do it. I had to
Mm.
now go into my senior year in high school. So I worked with them again over the next years. I did a couple of other shows with them, Promises, Promises, and Knickerbocker Holiday, and then Candide, which came back to DC. And when I was in DC, I flew to New York one day to audition for Sugar. And I got it. So I stayed in New York. So I was 18 and I was stayed in New York. And that was my first Broadway show with
That was
Gower
your Broadway
Champion.
debut. Oh,
Yeah, that was my
wow.
Broadway
Okay,
debut.
wait. Now
Yeah,
tell me a little bit more about that.
that was
What was
great.
your Broadway debut experience like?
It was so exciting. I mean, New York was different as it would be 50 some odd years ago, but it was a big show. Back then, shows had a lot of people in them. We had your principals, you did have your singing ensemble, and you had your dancers. It's only now that it's evolved since really Pippin, I think, where dancers were asked to sing or singers were asked to dance so that they can have smaller companies and be more affordable. So it was a big company. It was wonderful people that have done a lot of Broadway shows in it. It had Gower Champion, like I said, was the director and choreographer. Robert Morris and Tony Roberts were the leads, and I learned a lot. We had trouble. The show had trouble, so they stayed on the road for a few more months, which I loved because I had never been back to New York. So we went to Toronto and Baltimore and DC and Boston trying out. We kept trying out, and they made a lot of changes. And then we probably finally came into New York and opened, which was extremely exciting.
Hmm. Now, I know that that was a formative experience and it might be hard, but what is like one, if you could tie a bow on it, the most important thing you learned from your experience with sugar?
Yeah, it's funny you ask because people have asked something like that before, and something that's always stuck with me. There was a dance called Nice Ways that Elaine Joyce, who played Sugar, it was her number, and we on the ensemble had things to do with her. And there was a trio section. There was Elaine and myself and another dancer, Nicole Barth Lovely, and we did a little trio section with her. Not long, but a little trio section. And I remember in DC, it was right before intermission. When we came off for intermission, Gower Champion asked to speak to me, and I hardly spoke two words to him. I was 18, 19 at the time, so I didn't really speak much to him. And he said to me, Pam, you're a beautiful dancer, but you have to learn that when you support a leading lady, you can't dance that well. I'll never forget that because for me, just being out there, I gave it my all. And he said, no, you have to learn how to support the person who is the show is about the story. So it bothered me, made me work harder, made me want to do then eventually my own roles. But it was learning, and it was something that the whole business I never knew about before. I always had to give 110%. Now it's like,
Yeah.
keep a little lid on it. Yeah.
Wow. Very interesting. When did you first become aware of Bob Fosse?
Probably when I saw Cabaret, but I wasn't, I wasn't in the theater scene coming from California, so I didn't know about Charity, so to speak, and I didn't know about Little Me, other shows he did. So when I was doing Sugar, and now, everybody went, we didn't have agents then, everybody went to equity calls. So we all went to this audition for Bob Fosse for this show, Pippin. Okay, I'll go. So lo and behold, I got it. So that was really wonderful. And he taught me so much because when you're young and you haven't really, you're still open to hear so much. You haven't made your own decisions yet on things. He was it was a great place for him. He had just had Cabaret, Liza with the Z, doing Pippin. So he was on the top of the mountain, and he shared all of that with us, and I was very grateful, and I absorbed it. We all did. We all took in what we could from him. It was, yeah, it was a wonderful time.
Where was the audition for Pippin held?
It was at one of the theaters. It used to be at theaters, so I don't remember. There was,
Okay.
yeah, we never went. I don't remember auditioning at a studio. I think we always were at a theater because there were so many people,
Hmm.
It would be such an enormous turnout.
And how did he run auditions? What did he ask of you?
Well, Bobby always had, oh, and you have to excuse me, I always correct myself. We worked with Bob, and Bob insisted that he be Bob or Bobby, never Mr. Fosse, nothing. So we're kind of family. So whenever I speak to or pass on some of his dances or whatever, I say, right into a know that I don't mean to be disrespectful, but he's Bob or Bobby. I can't say Mr. Fosse. It just he's in my ear saying, Pam, no, no. So that's why I don't. I just want to say that I'll say Bob or Bobby to you.
Understood.
Yeah, but no, he always had T for two. That was his ballet combination
Hmm.
that all his auditions have. Everybody knew it. So we all did a T for two combination. And it showed him, he said to us later, who had training, because he always believed good ballet training was the basis of all dance. So he wanted to make sure people had ballet training. And rhythm, there was some rhythm in it, and there's a double turn. So there was all that, the standard dancer would know. So that was how he weeded. And then he had some fun combinations. He had a combination that we never did in the show, but I think he wanted to see our imagination.
Hmm.
And it was, we had to play with the balloon and we had to toss it in the air as we did hip things and we had to catch it on our nose and then do hip circles. But it was all imaginative. He wanted to see who could just not be a technical, wonderful dancer, but who could maybe come out of that and show a little of their personalities. So he did that.
Were there callbacks?
Yes, there was a
Yeah.
callback. I remember standing on the final line, and there was maybe 20 girls, I think, maybe. And Phil Friedman, our stage manager, said, okay, Bob would like the first three girls to take a step to their left. Well, the first three girls were Candy Brown, Ann Reinking, and me. Well, I didn't know, and we didn't know each other. All the girls I knew that worked were on the other side of the line, who were wonderful. Don't get me wrong. They did the Millikins. They had probably had 5 or 6 Broadway shows. I think Annie had only maybe done Coco and Candy had done. So there we were standing there. I remember just waiting till he finally pulled over Jennifer and Aaron Smith. And then he dismissed the others, thanked them. And then he said, I'd like you to do the show so that's how we got it. Yeah.
Wow. And so you were working with Ben Vereen in that show, correct?
Yes, yes, Ben and
Yes.
Johnny and all of us. Yeah.
So, what made you want to work with Bob again after working with him in Pippin?
How could you not want to? Well, I mean, in that 2 years that we were in Pippin before his kind of core went to Chicago, Bob was loyal in that if he appreciated your work, if he felt he could work with you, if you were able to do it's like most choreographers, I think they have a family that travels with them because they already have the lingo, they already know what they want, blah, blah, blah. So we were mostly in the show about 2 years. I think Candy left a couple months before for something, but nothing really. And in that time, he encouraged us. I remember talking to me. I went and studied acting at the neighborhood playhouse. Chris Chapman and I did that. Others did other acting classes. We started to do some commercials. We started to get an agent. Our careers started, but we had that real strong base of Pippin. And Bob, always at a phone call away. He was always very available for
Hmm.
questions or yeah, everything. Yeah.
What about in rehearsals? What do you remember about the ambiance of the room when he was leading it? What was the energy like?
Interesting you say that because I did 2 shows back to back with them and they were quite different. So I
Hmm.
don't want to confuse. Yeah, because when we did Pippin, like I said, Bob was at the height. I mean, he just was so, and he was, it was warm, it was inviting, it was loving, it was working. We hated taking 5-minute breaks. I always remember that you have to take your, 10 minute, an hour and a half, but we loved working so much. And during those breaks, I know Bob would stand there and we all smoked then, or a lot of us smoked. So we have our cigarettes, whenever. And Bob would share stories with us of times with the movies and on the studio set working with Gower and Tommy Roll and other people, and it was great fun. Yeah, he very very available, very
Mm.
available.
Wow. At what point did you become involved in the development of Chicago? Did you hear talks of them developing it before you auditioned, or was the audition your first?
Yeah, we all knew that they were doing Chicago. Bobby tried not to bring a lot of it to Pippin because he didn't know if he would take us. He didn't know, and so we didn't want to lead people or, get them hopes up if they weren't, because some of them had left, but some of us had still been there. And with Gwen and Chita and cute little Nicole, their daughter used to come to the theater. We all knew Nicole, and we didn't want to ask her, but she said, "Yeah, Dad's working on Chicago," and she was so cute because I think she was 10 or 11 or whatever, but it's very sweet. And she said, "I don't know. I hope he takes everybody." She was so dear because he didn't want to put her in that spot, and we didn't ask her. We didn't ask her.
Yeah.
But we didn't. Really talk about it. I mean, it was Gwen and Cheetah, and we didn't know what the ensemble would be like,
Hmm.
in that respect, who they needed. And eventually then he kind of took everyone who'd worked with him before. I think just there were maybe just a couple that hadn't, like I think Michelle Peacock, who was terrific. It was her time, I think, first time working with Bob.
Hmm.
And I mean, Graziella Danielle did it with us, Chicago, and she already was an established, beautiful dancer, becoming a choreographer, but she wanted to learn from Bob. So she took the show also to play Hunyak and dance with us and wanted to be, she was an assistant, so she wanted to be on the other side also, seeing how he created, how it came to be. And I know Stuart Ostro, our producer of Pippin, the main producer, Stu, had asked Bob to wait as long as he could before he took who we wanted to take because he wanted to keep us as long as we could. So
Yeah.
I think with the audition and when we were told we had a 2 week notice, and then on a pink contract, you had to give a 2 week notice. And I think there might have been maybe 2 weeks before we started Chicago. So it was kind of close because then he had to replace, Bob needed the time to replace all of us in Pippin. So that's
Hmm.
how that worked. Yeah.
As always, I highly encourage you to check out our YouTube channel. There's a video version of every episode if you're more of a visual learner, but beyond that, I've created a playlist of videos that are relevant to each episode. More than anything, I want this podcast to be a gateway or a launching point for you to begin investigating a piece of dance history that you maybe haven't engaged with before. My interviews could never capture the entirety of someone's experience with these great icons of dance, but the conversations we have here can lead to you discovering more. The playlists include old interviews with the dance icon, vintage footage of them dancing, and I've also included links to books that they've written. I try to provide as many avenues as possible for you to continue your own learning experiences.
Quite a bit of reading on the development of Chicago, like the development of the story and the script coming from Maureen
Mm.
Dallas Watkins
Mm.
and her story, and finding out I was so surprised that so much of it was actually based on real people. Beulah Anand and Belva Gardner, and the Billy Flynn character is really
Mhm.
based on the lawyer. Were you guys aware that it was based on multiple true stories, or was it just a script that was put in your hands?
Yeah, we just got a script. So we
Hmm.
heard what you said. We heard just I did. The principals might have, of course, delved deeper. I don't know. I don't know if
Hmm.
Bob said, "Don't worry about it. I want to do my own thing." I don't know what he told them. As an actor, you
Hmm.
never know how much you want to take in if you want to be fresh, whatever. But no, we were just given the scripts and which changed a lot.
Yeah, I went to the Library of Congress last summer, and I was looking at the Fosse Verdon archive there, and I saw some earlier drafts of the scripts, and seeing their handwritten notes and changes and stuff was really fascinating. And one that just kind of sticks out to me was there used to be a different name instead of Cicero. Do you know what it was?
Yeah, I
Do you remember?
have it in my script, but I can't remember. It was
Toledo.
yeah, but there's another one.
Oh, was there another? So interesting, though. This show has, over the last 50 years, kind of taken on a whole life of its own, right? And it's been found by so many millions of audience members around the world, but also different creatives have taken their stab at, staging it. And so the words and the lyrics have just become like kind of part of American culture, right? Like there's
Right.
so much, so many pop culture references to lyrics from the show. And so it's funny then just for us to see, well, this is the way it is. And then you see, oh my gosh, but it could have been this way. It could have been that way, seeing these different lyrics. It's like I can't imagine anything else other than Cicero there. There's just this like
The way the rhythm of
intense,
it, yeah. Hmm.
yes, that intensity with those S's and the way that it just kind of hisses. It's like Toledo. What would that like? That
Yeah,
wouldn't have
yeah,
been
I don't.
right.
Yeah, well, yeah. There was the beginning was difficult, and Bob didn't know exactly who to play what at first too, and then we kind of played it out. And then it was very Catherine Doby, who assisted him, who knew us well, said no, it should be this, 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 and he agreed on where we would stand with those monologues.
So tell me more. You're kind of, giving me little bits about the cell block. So how, I mean, such an iconic number. Tell me about
It
it.
really was. It was fun. We loved it. You know that you never saw it. I don't know if there's any film of it. Is there?
No,
Is there?
not of Cell Block. There's a few little clips of Hot Honey Rag,
Right.
and there's a few little clips floating around on YouTube, but not of Cell Block.
Well, Cell Block Tango, Jules Fisher devised for us. We carried bars. We carried cell bars. I don't know if
Hmm.
you knew that.
I've seen the picture. Yes, I have seen a
Okay,
still
so you've
picture
seen
of
that,
it.
right? And
Yes.
the only way, and they had little buttons on them that they could light up, so they would have lighting on our face. That's how sometimes you'd get this really crazy, like, it'd be black, but we'd press the buttons and the light would come on because they were, but to make it work, there had to be a gazillion like D batteries or whatever in them. They were so heavy.
Oh,
But we worked it. We got strong, but because the number itself is as you see it, we pranced around, we pounded our feet emotionally because of how we were in jail and hating it. And Bob had different formations and we came back and forth and we'd pound and whatever and jump back and forth. But we had to carry these bars around and we did, but they were
uh-huh.
heavy. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Is there any, I mean, has anyone restaged that choreography? Like, does that exist anywhere? Does anyone know it?
No, it's interesting. I don't think so. The little that I've seen, for some reason, when they redo Bob, they do it in a way that is I want to say this correctly. We were always young and very I think sexual and very attractive, but we didn't play that. Bobby just wanted us to be one. So like in this number, we had our regular costume on with these see-through jail coats on. Now the whole number is done very what's the right, like the movie, how Robbie Marshall did the movie, kind of a little more sexual and all that. So they've
Hmm.
never gone back to ours. Ours wasn't that way at all.
Mm.
Ours was just very factual. We're in jail. We hate it, but telling us about why we killed our husbands or whatever. Yeah, but it wasn't that. So they just take a different tone. So like everybody who does it now kind of takes that approach to the number.
So the entire cast and creative team of the show was just filled with heavy hitters. You've got Bob Fosse, John Kander, Fred Ebb, Chita Rivera, Gwen Verdon, Jerry Orbach. Um, was there ever clashing of strong personalities, or was it a smooth? How did the team work together?
You know, um, since Bob wasn't at his best because of what he had gone through, and wasn't the same like in Pippin. The family was very tight because we protected each other and wanted to make sure because it wasn't working and Bobby was having difficulties and he wasn't his old self. I mean, he didn't have as much energy, he couldn't, he had the heart, the whole. So he was frustrated on himself. Sometimes he'd take it out on, rightly so, but so we all hung together and supported each other and yeah, and that's was terrific. We all were there for each other, and they really cared about each other. Wanted everybody to be the best. They really did.
Hmm. What was it like being on stage with great actor, dancer, singers like that? Were you, I mean, I just imagine that it would have been like a master class every night, kind of being able to watch everyone around you and play off of each other.
I did. I watched. We all watched. I watched a lot. A lot. I watched Cheetah and Gwen a lot in the wings. I tried to, capture or because since we started for only was it 4 days before Bobby had the heart attack? It was so close, just a few days rehearsal, that the months off where they tried to keep us together, we did stuff socially. Gwen would have us over, or Chita did her act. We did stuff, so we kind of got to know each other and really became not so much there, more here, as
Hmm.
respecting each other, no matter principal or the lowest of the core, it didn't matter. We all were one. So when we
Hmm.
finally got back into the rehearsal room, it was really easy and it was
Hmm.
great.
How did you play Mona? What was that character to you? Did you develop her more yourself, or did Bob give you really specific direction on how to play her?
No, Bobby didn't really. He allowed us to just find our interpretation, you know. Um, I never remember a strong acting note at all. I remember just encouragement for all of us. I don't think, yeah, even if you talk to the other girls, I don't think Bobby really at that point, yeah, just let us, think about the monologue and how, Fred Ebb was the one who wrote them. So Freddie would come up sometimes, but he was always just very supportive. He
Hmm.
wasn't. It was good. You forgot Barney Martin. Barney Martin was Amos. And he broke our hearts. And people would know more Barney because he was Jerry Seinfeld's father. So if you ever watched Seinfeld,
Yeah.
have you said Barney? That was Amos.
Oh, wow. You're talking about the cast becoming close in that interim between the first rehearsals and later on. Once you were running in the show, were there any backstage traditions? What was the camaraderie like backstage?
Uh, Backstage, we just love seeing each other. We had rooms when you walked into the theater, the 46. You could have dressing rooms up there, but most of us crossed the stage, and there was a big room on the other side where the hair room was in front, and then there was a room in the back, and it was just easier to hang there, the boys and then the girls. And on the first landing, of course, was Cheetah's. Well, the stage level was Gwen's, and then you go up half the stairs, and there was Cheetah's. So it was always having to say hello to them, laugh. Cheetah always made us laugh, and great togetherness. Yeah, the others, yeah. So that we were very together, very tight knit. And I mean, what we did, I think not so much with Chicago, with Pippin, the girls played poker a lot of Saturday nights. We'd go to Catherine Dobie's and I'll get to that and play poker. And Bobby and would show up with Stanley Lebowski, the conductor. Could we play? So we play poker at her house. Yeah, it was kind of a tradition. We do that. But Chicago, I think we were getting older now. We were now had agents. We had more auditions that meant that we had to, prepare. We weren't as young and carefree as we were in Pippin.
What did you learn about yourself from doing Chicago versus, so this was your third Broadway show then? You've done
Yes.
Sugar and Pippin and now Chicago. How did you feel that it developed you as an artist in this point in your career?
It made me want to continue, definitely, definitely stay and wanted to create roles. I've had fun doing it. It was a tough journey. I have a story to tell you that I don't tell often because it embarrasses me. But when we were doing Chicago and we were trying out, and it was a tough time, and they were changing, and we went back to the original. Anyway, it was a cell block tango. And it was my moment to come up because Lipschitz follows Cicero, whatever, And I just stood there and I stood there and it's like everything left me. And I still remember to this day in my subconscious, I'm going, oh, it's so quiet. They're all listening to me and I love the lights. And I wasn't talking. It was my monologue. It was like I was in like this. I just went away. I just went away. But I remember standing there, center stage, downstage center, and just thinking, "Oh, this is so." And then, thank God, they must have sensed it because Stanley Lebowski, the conductor, gave the downbeat, bum, the dirty bum, bum, and we went into the
Uh-huh.
chorus. And afterwards, I was like, I don't know what happened to me. And Bobby came up, and he said, "It's okay." And Jerry Orbach, he said, "Pam, I'm happy it happened to you. It happens once in a career. It's happened to me. Good for you. Get rid of that. Now you can
Yeah.
check that one off. Oh my God. So that's when I'll never forget. But anyway, that's what but having, that small little part, having to be creative in the show more because Bobby asked us to, to create watching Gwen and Cheetah. I did. I wanted to do more.
Hmm. What was the highest compliment that Bobby ever paid you?
In my, remember, not the girls would probably tell Bob didn't compliment. Bob, he would give notes, but he wasn't one to compliment. If the work was right, you knew it was right and you moved on. And
Hmm.
that's the way we accepted it, and that's the way he was then, you know.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, you probably will get to it, but you know about Liza joining us, right?
Yeah, that was my next question. So let's do that. I want to hear about that
Oh,
story.
I don't mean to do, yeah, you just made me think of her. Oh my
No,
God,
it's
because you
great.
talk about family. Poor Gwen, something happened vocally, so they told her not to sing. Lenora was the cover. Lenora was fabulous. That's a whole nother story with Lenora being thrown on in Philadelphia, which I guess she'll tell you or I can tell you. It was so exciting. Anyway, it was Liza. They weren't sure about Chicago because we got mixed reviews. Chorus Line would open, it got all the reviews. It wasn't really great, and they didn't know not that Lenora couldn't do it, but they were thinking, how could we sell the show? And that's when Liza was with Fred and said, I'll do it. And she just learned it so fast. But she's such a trooper and such a company person. She's not, she just wanted to be with us and she would rehearse all the time and can you do this with me? And she was always around but the theater was like on fire because that's when her career was just at the top. And I mean, you couldn't get a seat during bows. They had to have guards by the aisles because people would want to run down to get her autograph. So they had to keep them back. And afterwards, trying to leave the stage door, well, forget it because the crowds that waited for her, we had to go through the other way. But anyway, she was just, I mean, we missed Gwen terribly and it was different, but she really, I think, helped at that point keep the show running and keep the buzz and more talk. And she was so gracious. Her first show with us, her opening night, she gave us gifts.
Hmm.
If you remember in Cabaret or Liza's look, then remember her look was those long eyelashes. Well,
Yeah.
she gave us all a card with a set of her long eyelashes. Well, we wore them forever, you know. That was the
That's so
best thing.
cute.
And that's so cute. Yeah, to say thank you for welcoming me. I hope I do you proud. So gracious. Yeah,
Hmm.
that was wonderful.
And she came into the show unannounced to the public, right? People
Yes,
didn't know on the first.
she didn't want it announced. I think they had to do it technically, by our company, the union, that they had to announce it at a place, not at House to Half. In tonight's
Hmm.
performance, the role of Roxy Hart will play Liza Minnelli. Yeah, and they had to do that. But
Hmm.
I don't know if, and they must have slipped the program on maybe her bio. I don't know, but they didn't have anything, her name there. She didn't want her name out there. She didn't want any of that. She knew it was, for the time being. And
Hmm.
she was great. Yeah, because I could tell you about Lenora, because she'll probably tell you, but she was Gwen's cover. She
Hmm.
was she sat in rehearsals, she sat there, she took notes, she was so great. Very soon, the first week in Philadelphia, Gwen goes on the bed, ooh, I gotta pee. And she goes to exit and she comes down wrong, I think, or sometimes she comes down and she pulls something in her leg that she can't go on. So curtain comes down. Bob comes up the aisle, I believe, from the audience. Hold on, let me see what's going on. We'll get to you. Gwen cannot dance. In the corner, off stage right, hunched down is Lenora with Graziella down the aisle, the dance captain, and a few of us. And Grazia saying, oh my God, Lenora, I can do it. Lenora said, you're going, I can do it. They pick her up, they rush you downstairs. They found whatever costume they could have on her because they hadn't made them yet, right? They put her in costume. Bobby must have told the audience, I remember that we'll be back on. Lenora Nemitz, blah, blah, blah. She sits her on the piano when she's already dressed, ready to be rolled on the piano to sing Funny Honey. We're all crying because I think we've never seen her dance it. We've never seen her do it, her understudy rehearsal. And she's so, I'll be fine, everybody. I'll be fine. And she was great. She was fine. We were so proud of her. It was one
Wow.
of those stories in the theater that you're happy to be a part of, because
Hmm.
they don't happen, thank God, that often. But yeah, Lenora, like a 42nd Street, the young one goes on
Yeah,
who's paired. It was so ask her about that when you speak with
I
her. I know
will.
she'll share, but oh, she was just tremendous. Yeah.
I mean, I have chills just listening to you tell the
It
story.
was just, I mean, because we then were so frightened for her. because we think how would, and she was so calming. And she said, I think she might say that might have helped her, having to calm us, maybe her, but she was great.
If you like the work being done here at Immortal Icons of Dance, there are several ways you can support. The easiest ways are to subscribe to the podcast and share the episodes when you enjoy them. You can join the Vault to gain exclusive access to a large collection of dance history ephemera that I've curated just for you. This includes historic photos, footage, quotes, articles, and more. Your support allows me to continue researching and preserving this history that we all love so much.
Happening in the same season, and you mentioned before we started recording that they weren't supposed to, and so was that Chicago was supposed to have opened the
Right,
year prior, but then
right.
with the heart trouble. Was there any sense of competition between the shows with the dancers? I'm sure maybe the creative teams would have felt that competition with award season, but how did the dancers feel?
It's interesting, as you're a dancer, you're such a small world, we all care about each other, but there's an innate competition because you just want to be the best. Not that you don't want them to be good, but you
Hmm.
just, so it was nothing out there, but I know it lived in the creatives. I know Michael and Bobby were like, oh, no, no,
Yeah.
but the creatives, but uh, yeah, because what happened when we went into rehearsals in the fall, we were supposed to open, I think that season, but much earlier than them because we were delayed. We opened very close to each, well, as you saw, yes, close to each other. That was that timing.
You performed at the Tony Awards that year, right? You guys did
With Pippin or Chicago?
with
Or
Chicago.
Yes, we did. We performed Jerry Orbach's All I Care About Is Love. Yes.
Can you tell me about that night?
Well, yes, that was difficult for us because both the chorus line in Chicago both had 12 nominations, 11, 12. We both had a lot. They opened the show, rightly so, with the opening of the show, which was right for the Tony Awards. It was a great opening number. But as the show progressed, I think our number was two-thirds into the show. We were into. So we had to sit and wait as every award went to a chorus line. So it was hard. It was defeating for us, our creatives, they all went. So when we finally did our number, which we were proud of, we left. We didn't even stay till the end of the
Oh,
show
really?
because
Wow.
we knew we wouldn't. And it's hard. You wish you're happy, good for them, but you wanted to get something or whatever. Yeah, it was a tough one. Yeah, it was a tough
Yeah.
one.
So Chicago ran for 15 months, which by all accounts, I mean, today anything that runs over a year is, a successful production. Did you stay with it for the entire run?
No. When they first when Chorus Line decided to do their next companies, their international and whatever, they had auditions and they had to go through your agents. And so when they finally saw me and I danced, they asked me to read for Val, which is tits and ass, which is the opposite of anything that I would do naturally. So I tried as an actress, but it wasn't my thing. So I never went on after my callback after I did, and I shouldn't. I was not right. That was Pammy Blair. I love her, Mitzi. That wasn't me. So I had to, well, other friends got to stay on because they were going up, and I wanted to do Cassie, but I knew I was younger and I didn't know if they would see me in that. So after that, they cast, and we were back in Chicago. I was fortunate that I was asked to do, or I did an industrial. Those were big back then, where the car companies and when they all had these big, industrial shows. And it was for Oldsmobile. Tad Tadlaw choreographed it. And I had a one, she gave me a brilliant solo number. And we did it in three cities. And when we were in New York at the Eurus, Bob Avian, Michael Bennett's assistant, so came to see it, and that's when they called my agent and said, "Oh my God, would Pam come and cover?" Because that at that point they were trying to get more people involved. So when I got off of my quick little 2 week tour with the industrial, I had to go back to Chicago for like a couple weeks, and then I went to Chorus Line just to be the second cover of Cassie, and then they wanted me to cover Sheila, and I said to my agent, "That's a stretch. I don't want to do that. I mean, I was very proud of myself because I could have done it physically, but it wasn't, I was
Yeah.
young. I didn't have that edge. I was young. So,
Well, yeah, what were you, 25 or 26 at
let's see,
this
that
point?
was, I was born in, let's see, the course line, we opened the show 22. That was like, so I was 22. I was 24, I think. Yeah, I was
24. Okay.
24, not quite 25. Yeah, that was what I was. And I just hadn't done enough. I didn't have that Kelly Bishop, that wonderful. So I was a second cover, which I was glad. I wanted to learn it. I really did. And
Hmm.
Keith Frederick was the cover. And that was when Donna was in London, I think, and Annie was in LA. Annie was coming back, Annie Ranking. And it was all these switchings around. And the next thing we knew, Vicky had to go to LA because whoever was taking over wasn't ready. And then Vicky got hurt, so they flew me out for 2 days, and then I had to come back. And then I was going to just be the cover because Annie was supposed to do the next week, and Donna was in London, and Annie thought she was done, so Annie was gone, so they had no Cassie. So, believe it or not, I get a call from the vocal coach, Paul Gavert, who was working with all of us. And in those days, we didn't have cell phones. We had our house phones or a service. So I got the call at home. Hi, Pam, it's Paul Gavert. Listen, I know you're working with me at 4, but do you want to come earlier since you're going on tonight? I said, I'm going on tonight? I hadn't had an understudy rehearsal. I used to have to do it in the wings because I was the second cover. Vicky was the cover. So I went with him. I went and yeah, I was kind of thrown on. And I was also in a Lenora position because I remember Tommy Walsh was so nervous for me because I said, Tommy, I get it. I got the places. I'll be okay, you guys, because you know your stuff. And I was fine. It was wonderful.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
There are moments though you wish you could, there are moments you have to act after you do a role that you wish you could have like you did the first time. And the first time when Cassie sings Chance to Dance, and she turns around and the mirror's behind, and you see yourself and the audience, but the audience isn't there in your mind, but you see this. I was so overtaken, honestly, that I wish I could have that moment real every night. Then you have to find it as an actress, and you can. But boy, when it's just immediate because it's real, I'll never forget that moment either. That was a great one.
Were you ever coached by Michael Bennett in the role?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Can you tell
Michael
me
is
about
still around
working with
today.
him?
Oh, Michael was great. Michael was great. He was a tease. He again also did a couple little extra things for me because Don and I dance similarly. We're down dancers as opposed to Annie's the up. So we did a lot similar. But there's a couple of things that he wanted to put me in attitude turn, little stuff that he wanted to play with me. And that was fine. But when he when I did it in New York for a month before Donna came back, they asked me to join the international company as Cassie. And Michael was so gracious. He said, you're young, but you need this. You're going to grow tremendously. I need you to do this for yourself and for me. I want you to join the company and play Cassie. I want you to not be their friend because you have to be this woman who's come back into the business who doesn't really know a lot of them. So don't be too chummy. Um, I want to pay. He paid me beautifully, and he said, and I give me 6 months. So I went on the road for him for 6 months, and then I wanted to leave, and he said, "If you open DC, I'll bring you to New York." So I opened DC for 2 weeks, and then he brought me to New York. So he was very kind to me and very gracious, and he would give me good notes, good notes when he was around.
What kind of notes? What would he
So,
ask of you?
yeah, he would just mostly don't rush something. I see your feeling. Don't rush it. I'm not in a hurry. We're not on the clock. We're not doing the film. Don't rush. So certain moments in the show and follow your instincts. And then a little few dance things that he would switch around. But no, he was kind, very kind, and I think he appreciated me. And he had me there twice. So that was that time I left, and then he had me back again, which was really great.
Hmm. How many years were you with a chorus line in your various productions?
I call it two-year stints because I
Okay.
left and then I found my husband, but he was doing there playing our song. He was the drummer and he was going to be in LA and I missed him. It was about 2 years and I wanted to be with him and I thought maybe I need to move on. And Michael Bennett said to me, Pam, I don't want to lose you, but I don't think anyone should do a show more than 2 years. See, I'll never forget this conversation. He said, I don't think you could be as creative and spontaneous, and it becomes more like rote, and more, and with anybody. So I'm going to miss you, but I totally understand. And so I left. And I was with my husband. I did some dinner theaters. Then I did the revival of Can Can with Roland Petit and Zizi Jeanbert, and now
Mhm.
we bombed. But when we bombed, Michael called me and said, "Look, I need a Cassie in next month. You want to come in?" I said, "Yeah, I'll come in." So I came back for another 2 years,
Uh-huh.
and then I left when I was pregnant with my son. I left when was pregnant.
Oh, wow. Are there any over those 2 years, any performances that stand out in your mind, whether because of special circumstances backstage or someone special in the audience, something that stands out in your memory?
With the chorus line, no, I just have nothing but really, what's the right word? I want to find the word. It was such a great time to play that character, to have that support of the show, to have the creatives still actively involved. That's why when they asked me to do some stuff that Bob taught, I'm trying to bring some of that, because as I bring what I remember to them, as they bring to someone else, it gets a little watered. And that's just tell them that's just the nature of life, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, Michael was, I just loved it. I mean, I remember sometimes my more fulfilling shows were the end of the week when I was a little tired because I didn't get in my own way. I had to
Yeah.
just be in the moment, and those were probably the better ones than when I had 2 days off and I was ready to go, maybe, because like Bobby used to tell us all, less is more. That's what he used to always tell us. Always have it filled, but less is more, because then the audience comes to you. You don't go and splay to them. They have to sit up and say, "Oh, that's interesting," as opposed to being lambasted with all that extra energy.
Hmm. The role of Cassie, asks a lot of the actor who takes her on, to look, deep inside yourself, and whether it's to pull up experiences that you've had, or sometimes if you're younger, to kind of try and find experiences that you haven't had yet. So what did the role of Cassie, teach you about yourself?
Well, it taught me how much or how important it is or how fulfilling it is to never forget to carry character and intention and whatever through dance in the number. In other words, you can't just dance it. And I didn't really, Bobby had taught me that, but being a solo, it made it even more so.
Hmm.
That that long expressive number that Cassie had, I worked very hard to have a through line of her journey in the number. And I made it my own for myself to
Hmm.
understand whys, highs, low, so hopefully. And I did get some wonderful compliments about that. So it must have resonated that people found the journey without words, just through, which I know ballet does, and other forms of dance do, or should do. And I don't know. It was just a great learning, being a young new actress, understanding substitutions. If you say a line that doesn't resonate, well, what does it mean to you, and how can I then interpret it so that it becomes your own, that you're not just being on the outside, that it's coming from the inside. So I'm glad to have had the experience. I think the time in the show allowed me to explore that, and allowed it to, because it doesn't happen overnight. So yeah.
Did you come back for the gala performance when it broke the record for the longest show on Broadway?
I was doing Cassie at the time.
You were okay. All right. So
I
you were
was
a part of that
pregnant
night.
with
Could you?
my son at 8 weeks.
Oh,
Had the
wow.
little
That's
guy in
special.
there.
Oh my gosh. So
Yes,
he was on stage too.
yes, he
So,
was. That was just so overwhelming. I can't, I mean, we had to do the show, so Michael was very cautious and gracious of not overusing our time. But I wish at times we would have been with everybody and all that. He kept us separate because we had to do the show at night. I mean, they came in 3 days before, four, I can't remember, so that he could set it all up, and they were down at 890 and doing all that. But we only went down when we were really necessary because he didn't think it was right for us. So um, I just remember we had the two shows, and the matinee was all our friends invited. We could invite the friends. The evening performance was black tie, but the friends came. Oh my God, just the energy, and just when Michael devised that opening number, we danced it because we were doing it. And you've probably seen the footage. And then he added the bars that in the black we exited and the originals came on and had the it's just still my
Me
hair on my
too.
arms because it just was so people resonated. People in the audience knew. So they were able to, because most everybody who saw a chorus line at that time could identify with one of the characters, something in their life, whether they're in the business world, as a doctor, but they could identify with the character's journey. And so I think it meant something to everybody. And it was just so exciting. And then of course that night, the way they tented in Schubert Alley, and it was all hors d'oeuvres and champagne, and then we did the show and the party afterwards. It just is beyond words at times, because saw old friends. Michael brought in anybody he could. When they did uh the one scene, and they had everyone from different countries come in, so the dialogue would be of a different country, and then it would be another, but we all knew what it was. It got to you because it meant so much to them. You just saw what it meant to them. And yeah, it was really special.
I always tell people that if I had a time machine, the very first place that I would go to would be that performance on that night. Like that is something that I wish that I had been alive to experience. Every time I read about it or hear about it, I just get chills. And, there were so many people in the room at the same time, in the theater at the same time. And I love hearing people's perspective from I was standing at the top of the balcony looking
Oh,
back at my friends on stage, or I was on stage looking up, or I was in the audience. And I just love hearing everybody's different memories of that special performance.
it's so sweet when you see the footage of the finale that Michael did, which brought everybody. When I looked at that and I see the young um, who never made it to Broadway come running down the aisles, the joy with their costumes on, the joy of just being part of this, it just is overwhelming to me because we get a little jaded on Broadway, we get a little, this, and but these ones did it in Hope, wherever, in the middle of the country, whatever. They never did that. So for them to be in New York on Broadway meant so much to them. I just, I'm happy for them, and I hope they probably still carry that with them, that moment.
Yeah. Can you tell me now, looking back 50 years later on both of these shows, what these experiences mean to you, what you've carried with you in your life, and how it impacted you?
Oh my gosh, so many things, from performing to choreographing, a little directing, being a mother, all those things. Yeah, it's interesting. It's as you live life, it can deepen you as a performer, And I remember Bill Esper, after our second year at Neighborhood Playhouse, we did the 2 year, and he said, "Now everyone, don't study anymore. Go live life. Live. You can take that with you, then you can have experience that you can then rely on, that if you get a part, that get out there and live life. Don't be in the classroom for a while, eventually, whatever." But he didn't, and I remember that, get out there, and as I was able to perform and do more roles, and as I got older, I mean, the second time I went back to do Cassie, I know in my heart, I think I was better because I had lived now. I was lived. I had done other shows. I had been responsible for this, whatever. So I automatically couldn't help but have more strength. You just do. So yeah, and taking that and always trying to remember Bob's words, like when I create, to make it count, but to have purpose. To I tell them, that's the disappointing thing for me sometimes is when they do Bobby's work. Bring it in. I know it had impact. When you watched it, it had such impact, but you don't dance that. You have to hold on and let them. So I try to encourage that. in them. Very grateful too. I mean, sometimes I don't realize that some of us are very fortunate. We had a lot in our era. If it wasn't Broadway, it was off Broadway. It was dinner theater. It was industrials. It was so many dances for commercials. There was so much to have in your repertoire. And I know it's lessened. I know the young talent doesn't have all those avenues anymore. And I'm sorry for them because it was great fun. It really was.
Well, we get to kind of relive that. We get to step into your shoes when we get to hear your story. So thank you for being so generous with your time and sharing so
Oh,
much
you're
with me today.
welcome. Thank you, sweetie. Thank you so
So
much. Good luck to
thank you
you.
very
The Immortal Icons of Dance podcast is written, edited, and produced by me, Lauren Johnson. Our music is written and produced by Shelby Rassler of Jenkins and Rassler, and technical support is provided by Anne-Marie Johnson and Jenny Albrecht. Major support for this season of the podcast was provided by Robert Schulman. I also wish to thank sponsors Zahif, Jenny, Margarita, Natalie, Mary, Liz, Jean, and Denise. If you'd like to support the work being done here by Immortal Icons of Dance, visit immortaliconsofdance.com/donate.